I'm Linisha Agrawal from the Doon Girls School. I would like to extend a warm welcome to our guest, Mr. Manoj Sharma, who is the Chief Naturalist at Jim's Jungle Retreat for the last 6 years. Sir came to Corbett Tiger Reserve 25 years ago, looking for birds and other wildlife, and decided to stay back. Jim Corbett National Park is a tiger reserve known for Bengal tigers and is the oldest national park in India. It is located in the Nainital district of Uttarakhand. There is a lot to know about this park, so let us hear from Sir. Please, Sir, I request you to share some of your experiences.
Thank you so much, Denisha, for this lovely little introduction. I'm so happy to be here, kids and ma'am, to be sharing a few moments on this remote Zoom presentation. But it's absolute pleasure to share what I have learned over last 2.5 decades in this park, because this is a beautiful park and has got a lot of wonderful, treasure of wealth. I mean, in terms of information that one can get about the wildlife and wild creatures. So I will take you through a presentation which is about the wildlife of Corbett Tiger Reserve, and I will also be sharing some of my experiences that I have gone through during these years. So I'll be starting this presentation. Welcome to Jim's Jungle Retreat. Seek the tiger, find the jungle is what we always say. Now, if we think about what it means, it actually means is when we come to a jungle, almost everyone wants to see that beautiful striped, huge cat called tiger. But when we go to the jungle looking for the tiger, we come across so many interesting creatures, so many different kinds of habitats. And this cannot be summed up in a better way than the tiger face image that has been created here. If you notice, right in the middle, there is an elephant. We can see some peacocks, some creepy crawlies here, crocodiles, a deer in the grass, antelope, pangolins, right on the top, some butterflies, a bird here coming down, then we have some here, wild boar, and so on. So this is, in fact, not one creature that we are going out to look for. This is a number of things. On one single exposure to the forest, we come across so many different creatures. And that's what we are going to talk about. Corbett Tiger Reserve, as they say, is the land of the roar, trumpet, and song. Roar of the tiger, trumpet of the elephant, and song of the bird. Legacy of Jim Corbett. Now, I'll very briefly speak about the man after whom the park is named. The park is named after Jim Corbett. Often the park is referred to as Jim Corbett National Park, which is not correct. The park is called Corbett National Park. Now, this is also the first national park of both India and Asia, established in 1936. Jim Corbett was a big game hunter. Now it's very interesting that a park, a conservation area where we save animals now, is named after a hunter. But Jim Corbett was no ordinary hunter. Corbett was born at Nainital, and those were the days when hunting was the norm of the day. Anybody and everybody who could possess a gun could hunt. Now, probably the word conservation had yet not been used in the sense of conserving wildlife. And in that kind of an atmosphere, when he grew up and he became a very accomplished hunter, they say he shot his first leopard while he was about the age of uh, 10 to 11 years. But Cobbett is famous because he shot a number of man-eating tigers and uh, leopards. Now, man-eating tigers and leopards are extremely rare. Uh, Rare because normally all these creatures are extremely shy of humans and they never attack people. But what happens when an animal is injured is no more capable of getting its natural prey. It may, in order to survive, adopt to a diet which includes humans, because humans are easy to bring down for an animal. A desperate creature which has not eaten for several days may probably turn a man-eater. Some of these could have been the result of a carelessly shot bullet of a hunter or poacher. Also imagine that the times when there were no roads up in the hills, no means of communication or transportation, no medical facilities, and if somebody was unfortunate enough to survive a man-eater's attack, this poor soul was injured, was to be carried many a times on a charpai, carried by 4 people up and down the hill trails for sometimes several days to reach the nearest road or the nearest medical facility. And when Cobbett went to these remote areas and killed these man-eaters, he was almost like a godsend, person for these hill folk. And they had great regard for this man. Often he was referred to as Carpet Sai, but he was also one of the earliest people in this country who could understand that the tiger was moving towards extinction. And he started advocating the cause of the tiger. He started advocating the cause of the jungles, because jungles were disappearing, they were being cleared. And he was one of the major forces behind the creation of Cobbett National Park, which at that time was not called Cobbett National Park, it was called Hailey National Park, named after its founder, Sir Malcolm Hailey, who was the governor of this area. Much later, in the middle of 1950s, after Cobbett had passed away, the park was renamed after Jim Cobbett. Here we can see Cobbett with probably one of the largest tigers ever recorded in this part of the world, Bachelor of Powellgarh. He wrote about 6 books, and these are some of the finest jungle stories ever, that went out of India. I remember having read one of Jim Cobbett's story as a school child, and I think that's why I'm here spending a major part of my life in these jungles. Very briefly, I'll take you through the topography of the park. Cobbett National Park, which is in the middle of this landscape, is the core zone of Cobbett Tiger Reserve, which is the larger area. Cobbett National Park is an area of 521 square kilometers, and Cobbett Tiger Reserve, which includes, apart from the national park, the reserve forest areas which are surrounding the national park and the Sona Nadi Wildlife Sanctuary, which is on the western side. Total area of 1,288 square kilometers. And here towards the southeast corner, if you can see, this is where we are, marked as JJR, which stands for Jim's Jungle Retreat. Cobbett Tiger Reserve is actually 3 ridges. This is the southernmost ridge, then the middle ridge, and then the northern ridge. And then you have some river valleys and a large reservoir here next to this beautiful place called Dikala, which is at the heart of the reserve. Elevation ranges from about 320 odd meters to about 1,350. Habitat diversity, we have great habitat diversity. We have grasslands. You can see the riverine grasslands here in the top left image, and you can see in the middle image, you can see the grasslands which are referred to as chors. These habitats support diverse wildlife, mammal life, bird life, insect life, reptilian life. And then we have the riverine forests. The top right image, you can see the river is always changing the landscape. With every successive flood, the river is always changing the landscape. I'll tell you something very interesting, kids. When you go to the riverbed, you see the boulders on the river. These round stones, these can only be created through water's action. If you climb up these small hills, any of the hills in the area that you can see, right on the top, you will still see these round boulders. That means all this area, whole of the landscape was under water at some point of time. And these hills have been created through river action. Then we have mixed forests of Corbett, support about 110 species of trees, about 50 to 60 species of shrubs, similar number of herbs, and so on. And then towards the right side bottom, we can see Sal forest. Sal is a beautiful tree, stands tall and straight and gains about 35 meters of height. And it is a species which takes over and it dominates the landscape. We have more than 60% of all tree cover in the area being. So I'm going to briefly talk about a few creatures that occur in the rivers. We have this beautiful fish called Mahasair, and Mahasair is, as they say, is the tiger of the waters. Mahasair is a fish which is known to grow to a weight of about 110 pounds. There was a fish that was caught long time ago by the legendary forest officer F.W. Champion. And kids, if you must be having his books in your library, and if not, try to get them. You'll easily get them in Dehradun. He wrote 2 fantastic books. He was the first man to indulge in photography of wild animals, and he was doing night photography in 1920s and 30s. And he probably got the first ever images of wild tigers, F.W. Champion. So F.W. Champion caught a fish, which golden Mahasair, which was about 110 pounds. It's a fish which grows to amazing size. But then we have these otters on the right hand side top. These are smooth-coated otters. Now, otters are amazing creatures. They are as naughty as children and probably more. I remember once we were watching a marsh crocodile, a magarmach. You can see the marsh crocodile on the bottom right. And then we noticed that there was a group of about 7-8 otters that came swimming, and then they came out of the water and they went to where the crocodile was and they surrounded the crocodile. And before crocodile could understand what was happening, one of the otters, big flipper-like tail, and the crocodile was furious. It turned towards that otter. The other one came from the other side and hit the croc. And a few quick slaps from left and right, and the croc ran away into water, only to be followed by the otters. Now, my guess is that probably they wanted the crocodile to be in water to push the fish towards them so that they could easily catch some. Very interesting incident that I was able to be witness of. Now, here we have on the bottom left side, Gharial. Gharial is actually bigger than the marsh crocodile. Gharial is also called fish-eating crocodile. Probably the snout is very narrow and bigger things probably cannot be taken. So it prefers to take only fish. But notice this beautiful male gharial at the tip of the snout has got this round bulbous structure which resembles the Indian clay pots, something that we call ghada. The carrier of the gharial, that's why this creature is named gharial.
Sir, I think one kid wants to ask something. Anaira?
I'm sorry?
One kid wants to ask something. I saw a kid raise a hand.
Yes,
Anaira,
please.
do you want to ask something, Beta?
Now, a few images of some of the reptiles. Top left, we can see the monitor lizard. Now, monitor lizard darts its tongue out like a snake, but it is not venomous. It cannot cause any harm to, at least to humans. Of course, it can catch its prey, which is sometimes birds or amphibians or reptiles, small creatures. Now here we can see the top middle image, a king cobra, which is actually eating a monitor lizard. A monitor lizard can grow to a length of about almost a meter, maybe slightly longer. But the cobra, king cobra, can be much longer, much bigger. It's recorded to grow to a length of about 17 feet. It is the largest venomous snake in the world. However, it is a very docile snake. Every time I came across king cobra, it was not aggressive. It was never aggressive. All these snakes are not venomous. In fact, very few snakes have venom, and even fewer have enough venom to kill people. And in fact, venom is a digestive enzyme for the snakes. Snakes do not chew their food like we do, so they swallow their food whole. They need something to digest them. So the venom acts like a digestive enzyme which is injected into the body of the prey, and it dissolves the internal organs so that it becomes easier for the snake to digest. And snakes do not want to waste their venom on humans because we are not their diet. Here we can see on the bottom left, Burmese python, which is a non-venomous snake, can grow to a length of 20 feet. Constrictors, they can eat big things like spotted deer or monkeys. On the right side, we have a spectacular Indian snake, iconic Indian snake, the cobra. Corbett is also a bird watcher's paradise. Out of about 10,000 species of birds that occur in the world, India has about 1,300 species, out of which about 550 species occur in Corbett tiger. We have birds for all seasons. We get birds from across Himalayas in the winter, the continental migrants. In the summer, we get summer breeding migrants, the ones that had gone down south. Summer, they come back to breed. We get passage migrants, the ones that are going from one place to another place and then stop over for some time. And then we get the resident birds, the ones that stay here all the time. Notice the bird on the top left, pigeon, is in a fruiting tree. Every time the pigeon takes the fruit, it also takes the seed, and the seed comes out with the dropping far away from the parent tree, and that is where the seed germinates. This is the seed dispersal mechanism for the plants, and such birds, the fruit-eating birds, are the seed dispersal agents. Now look at this woodpecker on the right side, top right. The woodpecker is an insectivorous bird. They say if there were no birds, this planet would have been ruled by insects. By controlling population of insects, the birds opened up a niche for humans to grow to what we are today. So thanks to the birds, the middle one is a bee eater, blue-tailed bee eater, again insectivorous bird. We have a wader, a beautiful bird here called ibis bill, very rare bird. Bottom left is red jungle fowl. This is what gave us the chicken. This is the eternal chicken. I think probably more than 7,000 years ago, this bird was domesticated, and that's how we have chicken across the world. And bottom right, we have the great hornbill. This is a majestic bird. The hornbills nest in the hollow of the tree. You can see it sitting on a hollow. Now imagine there is a female inside incubating the eggs, and the male is busy feeding her for a duration of over 1.5 months while she's inside the nest hole. And thereafter she comes out when the eggs hatch, and then they seal it off again for the safety of the young ones, and then for another 1.5 months almost, they feed the young ones which are inside the nest. Fantastic behavior. We have lots and lots of birds of prey. Pallas's fish eagle on the left top, changeable hawk eagle in the middle top, and we have crested serpent eagle on the bottom right. And then we have jungle owlet and the largest owl that occurs in the country, spot-bellied eagle owl on the bottom left. It's a wonderful world of birds. Wherever you go in the landscape in Corbett, you come across birds. A little bit about insects, and there are lots of them. I call them jewels of nature. In fact, the one that is on the left top is called jewel beetle. It's very brightly colored. We have here an image of a wasp carrying a grasshopper. The wasp is actually making a nest which is a clay nest. The grasshopper is stung and is paralyzed. The grasshopper will be sealed inside the nest, and an egg would be laid on top of it. So grasshopper in its paralyzed form is the food which is ready for the young one when the egg hatches. Parental duty is taken care of. No schooling for kids. And then we have almost 150 or 200 species of butterflies. You can see some of these at the bottom. The one on the left is lime butterfly. It's called lime butterfly because it lays its eggs on the wild lime plants. We have a few species of dragonflies, damselflies, and lots of other insects. So we have a lot of mammal diversity as well. We have about 50 species of mammals. We can see 4 species of deer, barking deer on the right top, hawk deer on the right bottom, spotted deer, and sambar. Sambar is also the largest deer that occurs in the country. And then we have lots of other mammals. We have the langur, mongoose, nilgai, wild boar, yellow-throated marten, Indian hare, jackal, porcupine, pangolin, civet cats, and so on. And then we have the sloth bear, the elusive sloth bear, not easy to come across, very nocturnal. I've spent about 25 years in this park, and I don't think I would have seen a sloth bear even 10 times. They start their day after our safaris are over, and they finish their foraging before the break of the dawn in the morning. So the day is actually night. But sloth bear also loves to climb up these trees that have got beehives. Now this is one tree where every season we get these large Indian bees which come and make their colonies. And the sloth bear loves to open them and feed on the honey and larvae of the bees. Elephants, the gentle giants. We have more than 1,000 elephants in this park. Elephants are very social animals. They live in herds, and this is a matriarchal society. The oldest female is the master of the herd, and the males, when they're about to turn adult, are thrown out of the herd, so they have to go and fend for themselves. Lone tuskers, as we call them. Elephants spend a lot of time, especially in the summer, in the water or in the mud holes, trying to cool off, and then they dust themselves to create a layer on their bodies so that they are not bothered by the heat or the insects. Now, elephants have an amazing role to play in nature. They are the eating machines. An elephant, I say, when it is not bathing and when it's not sleeping, is eating. An elephant can feed for up to 16 hours a day or longer. They feed on all kind of vegetation material, roots and tuber, grasses and bamboo, bark of the trees, fruit of all kind, branches and leaves. And a full-grown elephant can take about 150 to 200 kgs of vegetation material every day. Now, all this cannot be digested, and only about half of the food that they eat is digested, and rest everything comes out in the form of fiber and nutrition with the dung. And the role of elephants is to fertilize forest. Onto the cats, we have about 6 species of cats, out of which there are 4 lesser cats. We can see leopard cat and jungle cat here. The other 2 cats, the elusive fishing cat and the rusty spotted cat, are very, very difficult to come across and very nocturnal. So these are the 4 lesser cats we have in the landscape. And we have the leopard. The leopard is the ghost of the jungle. If tiger is the spirit of the jungle, leopard is the ghost of the jungle, because from where it comes and where it disappears, you never know. There are probably about 100 leopards in this park. Beautiful creatures. I remember last time I saw a mother leopard and a cub was on the water hole at the lodge. So we were looking at a water hole just outside the fence, and we were expecting to probably see a tiger which was showing up, and instead that evening the leopard female and the cub showed up. The large-hearted gentleman. In Corbett we have more tigers than anywhere else, more wild tigers. We have, as per the last count, about 250 tigers. No other place, no other park has got as many. Now, tiger is a large-hearted gentleman because this is how Jim Corbett portrayed the tiger, and this is how the tiger in reality behaves in jungle. Tiger is the guardian of the forest, and I'll come back to this quote of mine, and I'll explain how tiger is the guardian of the forest. But tiger never kills without reason. The first sign of the big striped cat, of course, whenever we go to the jungle, we come across a footprint. Now, if you look at the footprint, there is a large pad, and then there are 4 toes. If you notice, the toes are elongated. If these toes were broad and roundish and the pad was broader, and if we were to make an outline which was, rather than being a rectangle, was more squarish, this could have been a male tiger's footprint. This is a female. This is how we also identify that the tiger which passed by was a male or a female. Now, it's not easy being the king of the jungle. Why? Nature has been very generous at both the ends. Tiger, which sits on top of the food chain pyramid, it is an animal which governs everything that comes underneath. Remember, the tiger feeds on the deer, and the deer feeds on the grass and leaves. So tiger is controlling the population of the deer, and the deer is controlling the number of plants in any given area. Now, the tiger or the leopard, they have very soft pads. If you notice their foot, the pad is soft so that they don't make much sounds when they walk on the leaf litter of the forest. The tiger also has got these stripes, black and orange stripes, and it is not easy to see in the jungle. It camouflages, it merges with the bushes, with the trees, with the grasses so well that you cannot see. And the tiger can see very well, hear very well. But on the other end, the deer can run very fast. The deer can smell a tiger if the wind is blowing from the tiger's direction to the deer's direction. Deer can probably smell a tiger from a mile's distance. So this tigress, which was sitting at the root of this tree, waiting for 45 minutes for the sambar deer to come slightly closer so that it could attack and kill one. Eventually, when it charged, it missed. There were 3 sambar, it missed. So they say one attempt to make a kill out of 20 is successful. 20 times it tries, and then probably once it is successful. And tiger is never sure of its next meal. And tigers are highly territorial. A male tiger can have a area which is about 30 to 50 square kilometers, and female would have about 20 to 30 square kilometers. These are large areas, and they do not tolerate other tigers in their territory. So there can be a given number of tigers in any given patch of jungle. But once they hunt, they have very interesting adaptation. Their claws go back into the cavity in the toes. There is a sheath, and the claws can come out, and the claws can go back in, so that when the tiger is walking, it is not making any sound with its claws. But when it uses these claws for hunting, there is blood, hair, flesh that may also go inside. So the tigers scratch their claws against the tree trunks to clean and sharpen, and they love to be in water. No cat in the world willingly wants to go into water, but the tigers are the only ones. Exception, they can sit in water for long hours, especially in the summer. And this is how we count our tigers. We place cameras on the forest trails, which take images like these, side profile image of the animal. Now we can see one side, and if you take a cross section of the stripe pattern, let's say we cut this portion and we match this area with the similar area of any other picture that we have taken of any other tiger, we know whether these pictures are of the same animal or of different animals, because the stripe pattern of the tiger's body is as unique as our fingerprints. And tigers are the guardians of the forest. Guardians of the forest because tiger controls everything that comes underneath. It sits on top of the food chain pyramid. Tiger controls the population of all animals that it feeds on, including the monkey, the langur, the deer of all kind. And then these animals feed on other things. And this is how a balance is maintained. Imagine you remove the tiger from a forest like Corbett, which has got so many deer and monkey and wild boar, and you come back after 20 years, the population of these animals will have gone many times. And what they will do, they will eat up all the grasses, they will eat up all the plants. Remember I told you about the lime butterfly which lays its eggs only on the lime plant? If the lime plant was gone, the lime butterfly would not be there. So there are very, very delicate relationships that are shared between plants and animals, between animals and other animals. And tiger is the one animal which controls numbers of everything else in the jungle. And that's how we call it the guardian. And I'm sure with your well wishes, the tiger will live on for a long time to come, not only here in Corbett, but wherever else, they are found. And we will continue to see such beautiful sunrises across the forested reaches of the forests of Corbett and elsewhere. Now, I will briefly speak about Jim's Jungle Retreat. I'm fortunate that I have been working with Jim's Jungle Retreat for last 6 years. This is a perfect, sustainable ecotourism model. Now, what is an ecotourism model? See what happens when you come to any area which is a wilderness area, which is a natural area. There is a lot of natural wealth that area has to offer to the tourists. But what about the community? What about the villagers who belong to that area, who have been living there? They cannot make factories because there is jungle over there. They cannot make roads and bridges, buildings. So no development work or very little development work can happen. So how do these people then survive? So through ecotourism model, we ensure that people of the area benefit from the tourism. So how they benefit from the tourism? We'll see. Indulge in conservation of all kind of creatures that are to be found, because people will come to see wildlife. So whereas these are being conserved inside the park, we also conserve them at the property. So it's a 15-acre property. When the property was bought, it was open agricultural fields located next to the buffer zone of Corbett. And then we started planting local species of trees, shrubs, grasses. Now, image that you can see on the top, you can see one of our accommodations. This is a lodge. But see what kind of forest habitat has come up around this area. This is only possible because we have been planting local species of trees, shrubs and grasses. And today, in about 20 years' time, this patch of 15 acres has turned into a forest, and we get a lot of wildlife which comes visiting us. We get to see tigers and leopards just across the fence, and the elephants. Then we get the deer and the wild boar and the porcupine and civets and a lot of creatures on the properties. So conservation and habitat creation is the first steps. Then what we practice is conscious consumption. Conscious consumption means consuming only what is necessary and not unnecessarily buying, consuming things. That creates a lot of pressure on the resources and also creates a lot of waste. Community empowerment is a very, very important element of ecotourism. The community has to be empowered so that their dependence on the forest decreases, so that people do not go to the jungle to collect firewood or fodder. They do not go to the jungle to graze their animals. They do not indulge in activities like poaching. If they have their livelihood secure, if they can earn money through tourism, then they will not do it. So a lot of people work on hotels, properties like ours and others. And a lot of local people drive jeeps that go into the park or work as guides and so on. 90% plus of all our staff at Jim's Jungle Retreat is local people from the village itself or from the nearby villages located on the edge of the jungle. We use local architecture so that we blend into our surroundings, local manpower. If we need anybody to come and help us with anything, we try to use local manpower from the village itself or from the nearby areas. Local procurement. Now that means we try to get what we need first from the village itself where we are located, so that people, if they are not working as staff with us, they still benefit. So we try to procure the produce of the village, milk products, whatever we can our grain, whatever we can. If we cannot get it from the village, then we try to get it from the nearby places so that people of the area, we also grow a lot of our own stuff and talk about that. We indulge in solid waste management as a resort. You know, we try not to use things that are you know, not for nature, like plastic. So we minimize the use of plastic, and if we have to use anything that is not good for nature and produces waste, we segregate that waste and we dispose it off responsibly. That is our social responsibility towards this area, so that we do not litter the area, we do not spoil the area. And wherever possible, we use solar energy. We have an organic farm at the property. You can see lady with some organic produce. This is what is served in the meals. No chemicals used, no fertilizers. On the right side, you see this enclosure. Now, this is very interesting. What happens to all the water that goes out of the pipes? That is dirty water. There can also be some soap, some chemicals. Now, this water goes to a tank, and from this tank, this water goes to this enclosure, which has got 3 chambers, underground chambers. And on top of these chambers, this plant, which is in Hindi we call it keli. It's called Canna indica. So this plant has a natural capacity to soak up the chemicals and impurities from water. Its roots take all the pollutants from the water, and the water, after it gets purified through these 3 chambers, then can be used for watering the plants, so that we do not water the area or the plants, or release this water into the nearby area with all its chemicals. So this is the root zone wastewater treatment. And I'll also tell you what all we have in terms of what kids can do. We have a Young Rangers program. Kids can come and join us. It's very interesting. We indulge in a lot of activities with children, where we talk about the functioning of the ecosystem, how different things in a forest or in any kind of a habitat interact with each other. How we can create microcosms. So we talk about microcosm, which is a man-made functional model of any system. So here we are talking about natural systems. So water holes, for example, we create these beautiful water holes, and then we also study what happens inside the water hole, how the aquatic plants come in, how they make the oxygen available inside the water hole to other creatures like aquatic insects, fish, frogs, turtles, water snakes, and then a lot of things come to feed on these creatures, like birds, or a king cobra comes to catch a water snake, and so on. Very interesting. We have sessions on jungle tracks, signs and sounds, how to identify an animal looking at the footprint it has left on the forest floor, or what signs are there in the forest to look for, let's say a tiger. Tiger claw marks on a tree maybe, or a dropping on a forest floor telling us that there was a tiger here some time ago, or the jungle sounds. There are a lot of alarm calls that are made by the monkey or the deer when the tiger or the leopard are on the move, or there can be birds making sound, and identifying these sounds and pointing out what bird is making this sound. Very interesting exercise. Then we talk about birds and their role in nature. We talk about butterflies, jungle fairies, a butterfly's journey. And we have a nighttime exploration activity, phantoms of the night. We have camera trapping. These are night cameras which we put on the trails to get images and videos of wild creatures who visit us. This is all very interesting, kids. I hope you all enjoyed this presentation. I'll be happy to answer if there are any questions.
Garvita, you want to ask something, Beta? Unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am. Sir, is there anything in the snake's body that tells us that the snake is venomous or not?
Okay, there is nothing particular in snake's body that indicates that the snake is venomous, unless you have the snake in hand. But the coloration of the snake, the pattern of the snake's body can tell you whether the snake is venomous or not. So you have to, there are very few snakes actually which are venomous. In India, there are about 270 species of snakes. I would say majority of them, probably more than 60% of these snakes have no venom. Then all these snakes which have venom, a large majority of these snakes have very little venom to cause any harm to humans. Very few snakes have enough venom to kill people. If you can identify them by looking at the pattern of their, the coloration and the pattern on the bodies, that is the only visible sign.
So they can do a blood test, some kind of blood test, right, of snake to know if they're venomous.
No, I couldn't understand your question. बेटा दोबारा बताएंगे? Louder.
I once saw like they do some kind of, they check the blood of a snake to see if it is venomous.
They check the blood of the snake to check
Blood of the
that
snake.
it is
Well,
venomous.
the venom is not in the blood. You know what happens if a snake bites a person? There is anti-venom which is available for the common venomous snakes of India. There are 4 common snakes: the cobra, the karait, and 2 vipers: the Russell's viper and saw-scale viper. That anti-venom is given to the person if we know that one of these snakes has bitten. But I'm not aware of a blood test of the snake. I think the venom is in the venom glands which are located in the mouth of the snake, not in the blood, to the best of my knowledge.
So I have a question that, like you told, we can identify that from the pattern of the snake, that are they venomous or not. So what's different in the pattern of venomous snakes and
Okay. So easiest way is to get a book of snakes. It is easily available, and in a place like Dehradun, you have such wonderful bookstores like Natraj. If you have a book of snakes, it will have a section about the venomous snakes. If you go to that section, you will see how the venomous snakes are differently colored, differently marked, and you have to look for these signs if you come across a snake. For example, one visible sign which I can think of let's say cobra is that cobra can raise its hood. It can inflate its hood like this, and that is one visible sign that this is a cobra. But other snakes like karait does not inflate its hood, or the vipers do not do it. So you have to take the guidance either from the internet. If you search venomous snakes of India, you will get information on the internet, or you get a book of the snakes.
I came across a snake once.
Okay. Did you notice any color or pattern on the snake?
Actually, I was not able to see anything because I got so scared that I ran from there and told my parents.
All right.
I have a question. How do you
Yes, please.
identify? So in leopards, it's basically the rosette which
Yes, ma'am.
separates them, right? What is the marking in the tiger to know that this is a different tiger, and identification mark in the tiger? How do you?
You mean to say what are the identification markings of the
Identification.
tiger?
Yeah.
Individual tiger.
Individual. So you know that this is so
Now,
and so and this is that.
if you want to identify 2 different tigers, you have to look at the pattern of stripes. For example, this picture behind me, which is a depiction of a tiger. You have this orange body with a black stripe pattern. So, for example, this stripe is kind of a branching into Y, right? Now, a similar Y would not be here at this part of the body of any other tiger.
Oh.
So this kind of a pattern is as unique as our fingerprints.
Okay.
Yeah. And then if you look at the facial stripes, so facial stripes, other tiger may not have this, this kind of a facial stripe which is turning upwards, or the stripes on the forehead. But I think primarily we are using the stripes on the flank of the tiger. So if you have pictures of the flank, you compare the stripe pattern and you can make out whether these two images are of the same tiger or two different tigers.
Thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
Anybody else has any? Arnavi, please ask.
So how do you identify a tiger if it's a male or a female?
Okay, how do we identify a tiger if it's a male or a female? One, if we can see the tiger, males are bigger in size than the females. Males also tend to have a bigger head as compared to the female. Footprints that are left by the tiger after the tiger is gone, if we look at the footprint, remember I spoke about the pug mark of the tiger, where if the pad is narrow and the toes are longish, this is indicative of a female. And if pad is broad and toes are roundish and big, then it is a male tiger's footprint. So looking at the footprints also, we can make out whether a tiger is a male or a female.
And same goes with the baby tigers.
Same goes for the baby tigers, but with the babies it is not always possible to identify unless they gain certain age, which is at least about 1 year or 15 months. So after that,
one question.
it becomes slightly easy to identify males and females, because their bodies are developing. Their footprint is also, as cubs it is smaller. When they grow up, their foot also increases in size.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
There are many species of tigers. So which species of tiger is the most largest?
Okay, first of all, all the tigers are different subspecies. There are tigers in India, there are tigers in Siberia, there are tigers in parts of China, there are tigers in Southeast Asia. The largest tiger subspecies, so this is all one species, the largest subspecies is the Siberian tiger. They're very big because they're living in very cold habitat.
Okay, sir.
So one last question, though I don't think this is going to be last, but I hope so.
Yes, who wants to ask?
Tenzin.
Tenzin, yes.
Tenzin, ask Siri.
Yes, Tenzin?
You want to ask
You have
the
to
question?
Yes, ma'am. Sir, tigers like hot or cold?
Tigers like hot or cold? That's actually a very good question. See, tigers came from very cold areas. There used to be no tigers in India. We are talking about several thousand years. Tigers came from places like Siberia, which were very cold. This is during the last ice age. Ice age is a period on Earth when Earth was covered with snow or ice, and tigers came down from the colder areas and they came to India, they came into Southeast Asia, and these places are very hot. Now, tiger has not yet become used to this hot or the summer conditions or the monsoon humid conditions of India, and that is why tigers in summers love to go and sit in water. Remember, we spoke about tigers sit in water, so definitely they don't like summer. They like to be in cold seasons. They are more comfortable.
Okay, sir.
Sir, I have a question.
Thank you, sir. Who has a question? Shivli, please answer.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question that what's the scientific name of tigers?
Scientific name of tiger is Panthera tigris. Panthera is the genus and tigris is the specific name. And the tiger that we get in India, which is also called Bengal tiger, is called Panthera tigris.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, sir. Shivli?
Yeah, I think that should do, right?
Yeah.
I hope everybody enjoyed the presentation.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Amazing, absolutely. And I was fascinated by the pictures of the snakes. Wow, that was some variety, yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, sir. I got to know something more about tigers, apart from whether it's like hot or cold. I also found this interesting fact about the manicure and the pedicure part. I didn't know that part at all. Yeah, very interesting. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.